Hey, homeschoolers. Few things are as anxiety provoking as having a child who struggles with anxiety. I have spoken about this topic in the past, but today I want to take a fresh look at the topic. Before I dive in, though, I want to thank my sponsor for this episode, CTC Math. I want to apply the three-part framework I have recently discussed on this podcast to the topic of anxiety in particular. I'm going to link you up to both of the episodes I have done, the one on anxiety and the one on my three-part framework for managing emotions. I want to start with the first part of that framework, and that is prevention. I know that when we have an anxious child, we want to jump right in to dealing with the problem and solving it. But before we do that, I think it's so important to prevent the symptoms of anxiety in the first place. The first way that we can be sure to at least give our child the best chance possible of preventing anxiety is to make sure that your child is having regular sleep and wake times. As homeschoolers, we have the freedom typically to go to bed when we want to and to get up when we want to. But if your child is struggling with anxiety, it's possible that an erratic sleep schedule is not doing them any favors. So, as much as possible, we want to get our kids to bed at the same time and get them up at the same time. It's better to go without some sleep and get up at the same time if you've had a little bit of a late night. You can always have your child rest or even go to bed a little bit earlier the next night in order to recoup for some lost sleep. I would prefer that a child would have a nap or at least just have some quiet time to try to recover from a late night. Your child will have a lot more energy and will just be equipped to handle anything that is anxiety provoking that happens in their day. Next, we can prevent anxiety with exercise. Exercise is a wonder drug. It prevents anxiety. It prevents depression. It can prevent obesity. It can prevent all kinds of diseases. And it is something that we really want to build as a healthy habit for our kids. So we want to make sure that our kids are getting not just formal exercise, but also enough activity during the day. This can really help to reduce symptoms of anxiety. Then, if you have an older child who is taking in caffeine, we want to limit the amount of caffeine that an anxious child has, possibly to zero, because you have a child who is already demonstrating symptoms of anxiety. Most likely that's going to be teenagers, but it is worth the effort to break free from a bit of a habit or even an addiction to caffeinated beverages when you're struggling with anxiety. Next, we want to limit our kids' exposure to things that make them anxious unnecessarily. So, here's what I mean. The news is not necessary. We don't need to know about all the impending doom coming our way. I remember when I was a kid, the second ice age was coming, a nuclear bomb was coming, and I'm not saying that those things couldn't happen, but I'm saying that it did me no good to hear about those possibilities when I was 10 years old. And it is not going to do your child any favors to hear about all the anxious possibilities that could occur. The Bible says that we are not to worry because worry doesn't add a single day to our lives. It does us no favors. So we want to limit our kids' exposure to anxiety provoking media, whether that's the news, social media, the newspaper, any reading that a child is doing that is just not necessary in terms of their lives and their goals. But if it is necessary, my advice is going to be the opposite. And so I will talk about that when we talk about stage 3. So in stage 1, we want to do what we can to help prevent our child from becoming anxious. If it's not necessary and we are doing everything we can to support our child's health and energy levels, then we are doing the best that we possibly can to help our child prevent anxiety. Okay, so that would be stage 1. Stage 2 of the framework of how to help your anxious child is to help your child recognize the symptoms of anxiety. As a psychologist who had specialized to a certain degree in treating anxiety, and I had a number of children who were anxious in my office, I was surprised to learn that I was suffering from anxiety. I didn't feel stressed. I didn't recognize any phobias in my life. I did not have generalized anxiety. I did not have obsessive compulsive disorder, but I missed the signs of anxiety in my life. And so this is why it is so important that we teach our kids to recognize the signs and symptoms of anxiety that is brewing in their minds and in their bodies. So for me in particular, I was clenching my stomach muscles. I was making them very, very tight. For example, when we were running late, I would just tighten up that stomach like I was on a roller coaster ride, when all that potentially could happen to me and my kids is we could be a little bit late for an activity or a class. I don't want to have anxiety about minor issues like that because it will take a toll on my health. So, some other signs that your child might recognize in themselves as a predictor of them having anxiety are muscle tension. When I am tense, I tend to feel it in my neck and shoulders. I feel tightness and they're creeping up toward my ears. Headaches can be a symptom of anxiety. That tension again in those neck muscles can really produce a tension headache. That's why we call it a tension headache, of course. Our kids can experience that too. Your child might be experiencing stomach aches. I felt it as actual just like a tightness in my gut, but some kids will feel sick to their stomach because they're beginning or are in the full blown throes of anxiety. Some kids will have some other more extreme GI symptoms. I definitely did, where they have to run to the bathroom. And it's because they are starting to experience anxiety. This can be a clue that we need to do something. And we will talk about that in step 3. But some other things to consider, some other signs that your child's anxiety is escalating are insomnia. If your child is having trouble sleeping, that is definitely a sign that anxiety is in the equation. If your child has muscle aches, muscle tension, palpitations, hyperventilating, your child might have an asthma attack because of anxiety. And then, of course, there are some more psychological, social symptoms of anxiety that might be easier for your child to identify, that they just aren't willing to participate in something. They just stop talking and become hyper focused on whatever it is that they're anxious about. But I think it's very, very important to teach our kids the physical signs of anxiety so that they can recognize that something is happening inside of their minds and in their bodies that then they can take action on. So we all feel anxious at times, and it isn't going to be a problem unless we are coping with that anxiety in dysfunctional ways, ways that make our daily living intolerable. So if your child is refusing to do things like get together with friends, leave the house, if there is a phobia, then have any contact with that particular anxiety provoking situation, dogs or heights or flying, those kinds of things. If there is just out and out refusal to participate in those anxiety provoking situations, here is the problem. So you remember at the beginning, I was talking about how we want to eliminate things like the news if they create anxiety, because that's not necessary. It's not necessary for our child to read the latest, the sky is falling news story. But it is necessary for our kids to participate in activities of daily living that will help them grow and succeed in life. So let me just differentiate. I have no interest in skydiving. And that is not a problem for me because it's not required for me to have a happy and whole life. I'm actually not that afraid of it. I don't think I would die. I just don't enjoy that sensation of falling. When I have been on roller coasters and that kind of thing, I just don't enjoy it. So that is a different type of situation from I will not go to a party where there are people I don't know, or there is more than two people in attendance. That is something that is dysfunctional and is going to cause major pain in your child's life. And then we want to use the third part of the framework, which is substitution. So you have done what you can to help your child prevent anxiety. You have taught your child to recognize the signs of anxiety. And now we want to teach them what to do instead of avoidance. If your child continues to avoid these situations that make them anxious, the anxiety will get worse, not better. That is the number one takeaway that I want you to have about anxiety. It doesn't get better by avoiding, it gets worse. And if you think about this, it's like almost anything else when we say, I will deal with this messy basement later. I will deal with these bills, paying these bills later. And as we put it off, we are more likely to put it off because the problem will grow. More clutter will end up in our garage, and more bills will land in our mailbox or inbox waiting to be paid. And the anxiety then will be even higher about that particular situation. It's going to get worse. So we have to teach our kids that anxiety is like a workout. So I love to weight train. It's such an important part of my overall health and lifestyle. And if I were to go into the gym and pick up a 2-pound dumbbell and always just do a bicep curl, for example, with a 2-pound dumbbell, I would actually get weaker and weaker because I'm getting older. And so it's harder for me to maintain muscle. I have to actually push myself just because I am older in order to maintain the muscle that I have. But I absolutely would not build any muscle by continuing to lift a 2-pound dumbbell. And I would really be in trouble if I dropped then to a 1 pound dumbbell, if I said, you know what, I don't even like this 2 pounder, it annoys me, so I'm just going to do the 1 pounder. Our kids need to know that anxiety is just like weight training. And the only way that we get stronger and healthier is by pushing ourselves past our comfort zone, not into absolute pain. So, in other words, if your child is terrified of dogs, you don't put them in a, I can't even really imagine a situation, but like in a room full of really barking, growling German shepherds, for example. No, we wouldn't do that. That is a strategy that it will work in many cases, but it's so emotionally taxing that we wouldn't want to put our kids through it. So just as if I want to build muscle, I'm not going to go pick up 100-pound dumbbells and start trying to curl them. I'm going to get hurt, and our kids will too. So that is not what we are saying. Instead, we want our kids to always be pushing a little bit, a little bit, a little bit more, and repeating it. So I would not get strong or healthy if I went to the gym once a month and lifted weights. I have to do it regularly. I go 3 days a week, by the way, but our kids have to push themselves frequently out of their comfort zone. Well, how can they do that? How can they do that? With working out for me, I have to make it a pleasant experience. I go with my family. I listen to podcasts and music while I am doing it. And I use an app. It's just called Workout app, by the way, that helps to challenge me and to keep me on track so that I'm not just drifting around the gym, not knowing what I'm doing and not knowing what I did the last time I was there. So our kids also need some helps in order to push themselves out of their comfort zone. The first help that they need is a way to calm themselves down. When I am at the gym and I am lifting a heavy weight, I found this out the hard way when I was doing barbell squats once. I was unknowingly holding my breath. And because I did, I got a rip roaring headache as a result that lasted quite a while. And in fact, I kept feeling that headache every time I was lifting at the gym. So I learned not to hold my breath while I was lifting weights. Our kids, alternatively, but in the same vein, need to learn how to breathe when they recognize symptoms of anxiety. And I have a couple of different ways for your child to learn how to do that. So the first way is to take a deep breath in, hold it for a few seconds, and then let it out. As your child is breathing that way, it is an excellent idea to go ahead and, when they breathe in, tighten up those muscles. Tighten up the muscles. I like to do the shoulders and the neck muscles at that time, really make that muscle tight and hold it. And then when I breathe out, I relax my shoulder muscles. This can be done in any situation, and no one is going to know what your child is doing or why they are doing it. You know, they don't have to be as vocal as I was there in blowing it out. They don't have to make it quite as loud, but even if they did, no one is going to be the wiser. But doing some deep breathing is an excellent way to relax in an anxiety provoking situation. The second way, and this is the way that I teach in Training Aliens, my social and emotional skills curriculum, is to have them hold their breath until it feels uncomfortable. Now, they're not going to be trying to squat weights while they're doing it, so they will be fine. But they could take a deep breath in and then hold it until it is pretty uncomfortable, and then then breathe out. What tends to happen, I think, is when we are anxious, we can hyperventilate. We breathe too much. We're just and you've seen people, maybe even your child, in that kind of circumstance where they're just breathing too much, and it can really add to the anxiety. The other thing that I think happens when we do one of these two breathing methods is it gives our kids something else to focus on. So they are not thinking about what they are anxious about, and they also feel more in control. When we give an anxious child a tool, they feel like they can handle the anxiety much, much better. So that is my number one tool that we can use to substitute for just withdrawing and avoiding. The second powerful tool is to change the way we are thinking. Our thoughts are actually part of the prevention, and they can be part of the recognition of the symptoms of anxiety, because certain thoughts will dramatically increase the likelihood of us being anxious. And much of the time, those thoughts are either lies, like, for example, this dog is going to bite me, this dog is going to kill me. Well, if I truly believe that, then I'm going to feel quite anxious. I just had a situation the other day when I was out walking, and a big dog in this yard. It's a really cute dog, but it's quite a large dog. And many times when he sees me walking by his yard, he will come charging up to the edge of his yard. And so I thought, okay, this dog has an invisible fence. That's nice. I feel a lot more secure that he has a fence. So the other day I was walking and I was listening to music and exercising and just really enjoying myself. And before I even knew what was happening, the dog was licking my leg. It was right next to me. And I just screamed, but this dog was not biting me. I could tell it was a very friendly dog, but it did scare me. Now, am I going to be afraid of this dog in the future? No, because it got out of its yard and I saw that it's a very friendly dog who only wants to lick me and say hello. The point of that story is that our thoughts can create anxiety, and we can challenge lies that we believe. If I continue to believe this dog means to maul me and kill me, then I am going to have a lot of anxiety, and I'm going to be very tempted to not walk by that dog's yard in the future. But if I tell myself, this dog is not going to hurt me, it obviously has an invisible fence, and dogs just do what dogs do, which is to bark at people passing by. My own dogs do the very same thing. And so I can relax. Now, is that going to be enough to help me overcome anxiety? No. We have to do the reps. So it's just like the workout. I have to expose myself to what makes me anxious. I have to work on my self talk, what I am saying about the situation that can either make me anxious or help me to relax. And I have to repeat that and repeat that and repeat that. The other thing that I think is so, so important, the piece that gets left out of so much talk online about managing anxiety, and that is faith. If we believe, number one, that God is in control, that He loves us, that He will protect us unless He has a very good reason. And even then, if, for example, if that dog had attacked me, God would not have left me. He would have been there giving me peace, giving me the ability to get away from that dog. So this is what we have to remind ourselves of with scriptures, repeating scriptures, meditating on scriptures, And then we can do some truth journaling, especially when we aren't anxious. So if your child is having a problem with anxiety, then have them write down their anxious thoughts as they occur and then counteract them. Speak back to those anxious thoughts as though a friend of theirs were saying, "This is what I'm afraid of. This is what I'm thinking." What would a godly friend say to them? And making this a habit, this is something that I do almost daily. When I'm dealing with something, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling upset, I just pull out my phone. Now, your child may be too young to do that, but I pull out my phone and I write down, this is what I'm feeling. I'm afraid, for example, to go by that dog's yard. Then I can speak back to that and say, that dog did not bite me when I went by him. So he is very unlikely to be a violent dog. That would be an example of how to do it. If you have a really young child, have your child just verbalize the fears that they have. And then after they have done it, so let them do with a young child, let them just do one thought at a time. I am afraid that my neighbor's dog will bite me. Then you, as a parent, can reflect it back. You can say, I'm going to be your thoughts right now. And then you tell me what I should be thinking instead. So you say, I'm afraid that the neighbor's dog is going to bite me. And then encourage your child to say what would be helpful to you to reduce your anxiety. This is not a one and done solution. This is really a lifestyle that can help your child prevent anxiety, recognize anxiety, and then substitute functional adaptive behaviors for the ones that are currently causing them difficulty for anxiety when it occurs. It will take years of practice, most likely. If your child just has a tendency to be anxious, it is something that can be overcome. I would love to have you try out Training Aliens if you haven't already. The very first lesson is about meeting people and shyness, which is a form of anxiety. So it can get you started in a very fun way that I think your child would appreciate. I would like to thank my sponsor for this episode once again, CTC Math. If you would like to get the resources for this episode, go to homeschoolsanity.com/anxiouschild. Have a happy homeschool week.